Okay, well, let's see. We could give it another minute, I guess. See who else shows up. Okay, do you see anyone new? I do. At least one. So while we're waiting, Aditya, would you mind introducing yourself briefly?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Aditya. I'm currently a master's student, soon to be a PhD student at NYU, the Secure Systems Lab under Professor Justin Kapos. I am working on software supply chain security as a whole, but very specifically, I've been involved with the in-toto project for about a year and a half now.
Cool, thanks. Okay, let's get started. 12:05. Hi, everyone. So hope this meeting finds you well. I see the next agenda on the item is Matt wanted to talk about our new associate maintainer, Carolyn. Please take it away.
Yeah. For those of you not familiar with our governance structure, we have two levels of maintainers. We have contributing maintainers who do a lot of work on making contributions and working on the spec, and of course coming and participating in these meetings. And then we have associate maintainers who are what we call voting maintainers, who have the ability to vote on the changes that we need, most specifically when we release new specifications, voting on those, but also when it comes to change requests coming in the form of PRs, voting on those. So I'm very, very happy to welcome Carolyn as the newest member of that particular group of maintainers. She's been a long-time contributor, and so this is a great thing to have her, officially on as one of the associate maintainers.
Welcome,
Yay!
welcome. Long
Thank
overdue.
you.
Clap, clap, clap. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is add parameter sources custom extension. Caroline herself, please take it away.
Yeah, let me share my screen. So what we're thinking of for this is it's two pieces for this. One is this actually sharing?
Yep.
Okay, great. Zoom has changed. It doesn't show me a little green window anymore. So one, it kind of backfills a gap that we added to the spec when we changed claims. Previously, when an output was generated, when you ran an action, the contents of the output was put into the claim itself, which seemed perfectly fine for innocuous things like I made an IP address and things like that. And it made it possible for one action to pass data along into the next action. So install would make something like an IP address, and then when upgrade needed something, the claim is loaded into the bundles environment, and then it's able to read it out of the claim and get that IP address, and everything seemed pretty nifty, right? But that actually didn't work because like a lot of outputs are ginormous. Think of database dumps, for example, would be one example of an output. And outputs weren't always applicable to every action. And there was all sorts of reasons for why it didn't make sense actually to embed them in claims. And it did definitely bloat claims. So we took them out of claims. And so this kind of gave us a way for actions to be able to say, I still needed something that came out of install, and maybe I'm upgrade now or I'm a custom action. So what this is parameter sources where we want to be able to say, I'm a parameter and I'm authoring the bundle. And I know that this parameter for upgrade, which maybe is this, maybe a connection string, it knows that it actually would best come from the output from maybe the install action. So it allows, as a custom extension, the author to say, the install action is going to generate an output, and these parameters that probably apply to later subsequent actions will want to be able to source their value from these outputs. So, it fixes that one problem, but it also is kind of cool because it allows you to chain and pass values more clearly in a more structured way between actions. This is something that Porter's actually always done. So it's actually kind of cool too, because it takes something that was always just kind of like a Porter specific feature and makes it a first class kind of structured metadata inside the bundle JSON in the custom metadata as well. So it's pretty cool. People have been giving some feedback already to make it even more robust. So if you want to take a look at it and kind of see what you could do with it as well and provide feedback, it's at its very early stage right now. So now's the best time to rip it to shreds. Yeah.
Cool, very cool. This I see there's already some feedback on the PR. Does anyone wanna discuss this now, or would you rather read it and add comments to the PR later?
I had a chance to look at some of them, and like Jacob's stuff, for example, is all really good. I just need to start like incorporating it into the PR, right? It's not controversial. They're all good suggestions.
If we have time in the agenda, it might be nice to get some feedback really quickly on the question of whether we want to support multiple parameter sources in the future, potentially, for the same parameter.
I thought that was a great idea. Being able to say, like, it could come from here, it could come from there, here's the preferential order. Yeah, I thought that was really good, actually, because you don't always know, especially if the bundle could support maybe being installed into different types of environments, like a dev environment versus a test environment, or one type of cloud versus another. You may be able to find data in different places. I don't know. I don't see a problem with having it be pretty flexible, and I think it makes it stronger.
I just had a thought. When a parameter has a default value, how would it interact with this? Like, if it also has a parameter source declared, perhaps if that's empty, it would fall back to the default, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one thing is that each implementation may have additional data beyond what's just in parameter sources and defaults. So I didn't want to encode the full order of like, you must follow all these things. I wanted to keep that out of this. And it's actually, I think it's explicitly said in the spec here that we don't say how you should set the final parameter value. It's just a set of optional ways for an author to hint at where to find the parameter source, but it's up to the implementation to decide what's the full fallback order for finding things. Because Porter may want to do it one way, and somebody else who has a different implementation may have unique and different sources of data that may have a completely different like hierarchy and precedence order. But when we were like informally talking about it, default would be like the last thing you would look for in the chain, and user supplied values would be the highest precedence.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
I think it might not hurt to say like the runtime should surface an error to the user if like it goes through all the parameter sources and can't retrieve a parameter, and there's also new default specified.
Yeah. Did you have that as a comment already, or do I need to write that down?
Yeah, but the bit about what the behavior if a default parameter is there, value is available, should be added too, I think. I just say like an error should be surfaced by the runtime if the parameter is required and cannot be resolved from any known sources.
Okay, I got that written down.
Why should and not must?
Could be must.
I think it depends on if it's a required parameter or not. That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, actually, since it's an extension, obviously implementing the extension is optional, but for implementers of the extension, maybe it should be a must error if parameter can't be resolved. The only other case might be if a runtime wants to fall back to prompting a user for a value or something without directly erroring. There could be room for different implementation opinions there.
I'll put a question mark on that. We'll think about it. I'm going to put in like maybe thinking of some scenarios around prompting and required.
Yeah.
I don't want to back implementations into the corner. Like, I wanted this to more be hints that would help versus just causing implementations that'll have to do the same thing, I guess. The point wasn't to cause us to all completely standardize.
No, it was just because I heard required that I pushed for must, but why? So, I asked why not must. But I completely agree. We want to make it so that we point people in the right direction. So the UX is good enough, but leave them enough space to make a good UX.
No.
It's funny because we're at if it's an extension, so it's a may, and we have a must behind the may, it feels kind of weird. That's yeah.
You do this, you all of a sudden lock yourself into a lot of heavy requirements. That's what I wanted to avoid, I guess. Because I could definitely see a customized implementation that may be able to pull parameter sources from really unique places, which is another reason why I didn't want to have the hierarchy hard-coded. Like, they may be able to find things from interesting places that we don't have in the spec. So if they can't find it from the parameter sources, I don't want to say you have to error, I guess. Or you have to pull it from a certain, like I said, priority source first,
well,
second, third.
At runtime, so when it actually does the action, it must give an error if it doesn't have a value that's required, right?
Yeah, and that's
So,
just in, the core spec.
Yeah, but even yeah.
Yeah, with the update to the object there that I wrote about, I think maybe we could just have a map of parameter sources, and then those also have well-known keys for, like, obviously the output source being one, potentially like console or vault or S3, whatever. We could have multiple well-known sources, but runtimes that don't implement the ability to resolve those sources can just skip them in the priority. So they go through the list of sources by priority and skip or like surface a warning to users when they can't use those. And ultimately, if they can't resolve anything, then they should show an error to the user.
Okay.
Ooh. Do you guys want to discuss this further, or should we move on to the next one? Okay, let's move on to the next one. So I don't know if anyone noticed, but Jacob's background is just very, very appropriate. Well done for effort. Maybe he could put CNABBE next time. Very good. So I'm not sure whether this is a new person. At least I haven't seen them before. MC Chorfar, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Mohammed Chorfa here. I'm interested in CNAB and Porter in particular. I work for a company called Thales, and we are heavily using Porter in order to prepare our proper bundles. And that's it. I'm just a developer interested in CNAB and Porter.
Very nice. Welcome, Mohammed. What's the company name again? Ralph is asking.
Thales, THLES.
Ah, the hardware security maker.
Yes, and we do work on software as well. We are based in Canada, so.
Cool. Welcome. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Let's see. So the next agenda on the item is, I think before we go on to security, because that's fairly fair number of items there, I'd like to discuss non-security first. Shall we discuss the canonical JSON and Helm values file? That's Jacob.
Yes, sorry, I meant to get back on Slack and further clarify this.
Yeah, I added it on the agenda just to make sure we don't forget about it.
Thanks. I'm trying to come up with a workable example. I think there's a chance that this is just like some really crazy stuff that's happening inside of Helm values that I'm not sure of exactly. I haven't encountered it myself yet, but we do see an error when we try to use the canonical JSON package to marshal that's not there when we use the encoding JSON package to marshal from a Go interface.
Can I ask a question first? For a bit of background, we've been chatting about this in Slack yesterday and Monday, I think. Are you trying, so the canonical encoder in the Go canonical package takes either a Go struct or non-canonicalized JSON and returns canonical JSON. Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, so are you trying to pass a YAML file to that encoder? And what specifically are you trying to do? That's the part that I'm missing.
So what's actually happening for us is we're unmarshaling a YAML file, multiple YAML files, merging them, their values together, exactly the way Helm merges value files together. Then out of that, we get a map string interface in Go, and then we want to marshal that back to JSON ultimately to be passed in as a CNAB parameter. And that marshal step is what's failing for us with canonical JSON.
Huh. This seems interesting because if you're, so you have a map of string and interface, and does the step prior to getting the map fail with the canonical encoder?
The canonical JSON package is not involved until we marshal. So we unmarshal YAML into map string interface, merge these all together, and then try to marshal with the canonical JSON package again.
Huh. Okay. So the canonical encoder, the canonical JSON encoder errors out if there's any unsupported character from the JSON OLDP spec, like end of line, new line, spaces in keys and things like that. Do you have any of those by any chance?
Yeah, I think that's probably the problem. If you look at the test cases that were added in that PR, I think that should be what causes the problem for us.
That's an interesting bug. I'd like to take a look myself. See what's causing it.
Yeah, I think thanks for the explanation, Jacob. I think I understand a little better what you're trying to do. I think not everyone on this call is interested in this, and we might want to take it offline. Carolyn?
Can I ask a quick question about the setup again? Because this sounds similar to something that Vaughn helped solve in Porter. Is it ultimately you have a YAML file and you want it to be in the bundle.json, or why does it need to be canonical? That's the part I kind of missed at the beginning.
Well, we need to, we want to pass it in as a CNAB parameter, therefore it'll be included in a claim object at some point. And we want to be able to marshal that with canonical JSON so that we can digest the claim and be able to like cache results based on the claim digest, etc.
So one thing we do, and like Vaughn, speak up if you, because you know more about that, you implemented this. Porter actually added a custom parameter type that only Porter understands, which is file. And when we see that, you pass it into Porter as a file, and we base64 encode it, and that's how we're able to get it in and not have it muck up canonical JSON. And then when it comes into the runtime, we actually decode it and put it on the file system as your normal file. So as far as the bundle sees it, it's your normal file, but when it rides through on the bundle JSON, it's base64 encoded as a string type.
Yeah. We've actually
That's how
done
we worked
something
around the
pretty similar.
canonical problem.
The additional thing here is that we also have schemas for these this configuration that we want to enforce via the same mechanisms that we enforce schema for other parameters. So representing it as JSON rather than base64 data is advantageous there as well. We can allow users to, like through a web UI that manages CNAB deployments, they can look at and inspect and edit parameters right there, even if they're like deeply nested Helm values, for example.
Okay.
We'd rather not lose that too.
Yeah. I hate canonical JSON. That's all I have to contribute. Sorry. Sounds like I won't help, but
Shall I
just wanna
add that
share
to
like
the?
what we're doing.
Shall I add that to the notes,
Oh.
Carolyn?
Yes, you should. I want that recorded for all posterity.
I know. I was just gonna say, even if you don't add it, it's being recorded. So
There are other workarounds that we can think of, I'm sure, but just wanted someone, an engineer on our team, opened that PR right away, and before I even really had a chance to dig into the issue myself. So it looks like that does fix it for us, but I'm not sure if it's in line with the canonical JSON spec.
We do have a very, very basic smokescreen test that we used a couple of months back for canonical JSON. We have our Rust implementation. So we check that the output of any of our test files matches the content digest for both implementations. So I'll give that a try with the latest changes, but it might break some behavior that we don't know about, specifically when the encoder should error out, but now it doesn't because it accepts more separators like that.
Thanks.
sorry, I had to troll people there about which base encoding was the best. Speaking of trolling, did anyone notice Radu's background? Does anyone know what it is? I believe Matt knows.
It's seriously distracting. It's my office.
Oh, that's good.
We've got the same thing happening at our work, where the new way of instead of going on Slack and typing something in the general channel or something like that, when their keyboard's not locked or their laptop's not locked, you try to get a screenshot when they're not there, and then you can pretend to be at their house.
I love it. That's a good one. I'm gonna steal that. Cool. Let's see. The next one is I wanted Mohammed to talk about some comments he had about CNAB dependencies, but unfortunately he looks like he dropped off. So we'll table that one until he comes back for the next meeting. I think the next thing we should talk about is perhaps the registry specification. Radu or Chris, would you like to take this one?
The only thing I wanted to point out is that after the last meeting, we decided to just take the pull request that I just pasted in chat out of draft status to give people a chance to review it and then maybe merge it sooner so that we can have individual changes with individual PRs with the changes we want to have in the spec itself. So please have a look at that PR. If you think it's in a state that we can have as a draft, we should go ahead and merge it and then allow people to come up with new PRs.
Matt has to go early, unfortunately.
I do. Can I really quickly ask if we think that we are on track to put the claim spec up for a vote during the month of May, even if it's the tail end of May? Silence means yes. Great.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's commit to doing that. Woo!
That was like my one Administrivia item that I really wanted to see if we could do today.
Cool. Glad we could make progress there.
Maybe another question would be what's blocking it, but I don't think there's anything.
I think it's only ennui that's blocking it, which I think we can overcome.
I think it might be nice to get an implementation into CNAB Go before we merge it or make it not draft anymore.
Yep.
Just to make sure we uncover anything when we go and actually implement it.
I think for the whoever's helping to take minutes, I think it should be different than under the same discussion for the registry specification.
Yeah, I agree, but it's hard to take notes and refactor the
sections
at the same time.
I understand. Just a note. No blame games here. Cool. I think we're ready to have the security people take over the rest of the meeting now. Let's see. So we got quite a few things. It's basically 2 PRs. Actually, there's 4 PRs now. That's great. Let's start with the simplest one. So before I go to security, is there anything that anyone else wants to talk about? Okay, take that as a no.
Well, Aditya is back if you wanted to talk about the dependencies.
Yeah, but I'm afraid Mohammed is not here.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Okay, cool. So for security, what we want to talk about is 4 PRs. Let's start with what looks like the simplest one, known implementations. Radu, I think we're ready to merge this as draft. Would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, I think we are ready to merge as draft. Let me just put a link to the PR itself. We've been discussing it for the past couple of security meetings. It just needs someone who is a spec maintainer to sign off on it. It's still a draft, but we want to have it merged so people can have a coherent read of the security spec. So if you're a spec maintainer, please do have a read on this. We want to have it merged. Still as a draft, we want to have it merged and mastered.
Cool, yeah. Maybe we can ping someone about this in the Slack channel too. Cool. I think that's ready.
I'll ping Matt and Chris maybe about it.
Okay.
Yeah, good. And if you're having trouble getting traction, do let me know.
Sounds good. I think the next one that follows in naturally is clarify how to verify and inspect in-toto metadata. I'm not sure who added that. Would you like to talk about this?
I added it as well. It's more or less the same status as the previous PR. Specifically, it's been discussed in the security meetings, and we just need a final sign off from someone who is a spec maintainer. I think I reviewed it and I gave it an LGTM. I think we need one more before merging.
Right, now I remember this. How embarrassing.
It's your PR.
Exactly, and I forgot about this. Thanks for championing it. Okay, cool. So 2 PRs that are basically ready and just needs a comment review from one of the spec maintainers. Great. Let's see, what's the next one that we should talk about? Maybe let's start with 73, which is the option to verify in-toto metadata on OS or container. This PR was basically talking about where do we verify. So we use Notary, right? Which is basically a version of Tough to store metadata about bundles, including in-toto metadata. And that tells you whether the bundle is done properly or not. And then the question is, so they're basically arbitrary commands that you can run as part of in-toto inspections. You can do things like untarring a file, for example. And the question is, where do we run that? Now, it used to be done only on a container, which we now provide by default. But now we also give you the option, like people like Jacob wanted, is the option to run the inspections on the OS for the sake of speed. So that's the PR. What's blocking us? Oh, I see. this review by Radu, and we need Docker Hub credentials for GitHub Action, which we need to get from Juan. And we do need an image tagging strategy. Maybe we can talk about that now. Right now, Radu, what I'm doing is, okay, so the Signy gives you this in-toto verification image out of the box, right? We're pushing it to the Docker CNAB.io organization on Docker.io. The question is, how do we tag the image? Right now, I gotta say it's not elegant. I wanted to tag it by what the actual GitHub tag was. I mean, sorry, the Git tag was. But this turned out to be non-trivial to get. At least I couldn't find it immediately in GitHub Actions. It wasn't clean, especially if you're triggering it from a pull request, right? So if someone knows a better way, please tell me. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm tagging the images by the commit hash, which is not great because it's not a great identifier. It's not human readable. And secondly, you're basically pushing a new tag for every pull request and push, which is not great. You're also littering the Docker repo. So I need to look into how to extract the Git tag cleanly from GitHub Actions, which I've not been able to find, but I'll make it a note to myself to do that. Does anyone have preferences here? Any hot takes?
I'll let Vaughn talk first.
Oh, just on the subject of, I can see the reasons of not wanting to populate the registry with a bunch of commit shot tagged images. I wonder, do registries now have tools to like clean up after a certain time? I haven't really played around with these, but there might be optionality there. Otherwise, yeah, I can help search on techniques to find a better tag off of PRs. I don't know the quickest way off the top of my head right now.
My question is, I think we definitely need to tag and push an image for each version, for each release we have of Signy, and I think they should be in sync with whatever the release of Signy is. There should be a corresponding tag for a verification image that is compatible with Signy at that release. The main question is, do we actually need to have a verification image for each pull request, for each tag that the git commit has? Or if we really do want to have an ongoing updated verification image, can we just use an edge tag that is always master? And we just always assume that if you're specifically using edge or latest, you don't really get a choice of which actual version is there. If you want to have a stable version, feel free to use the latest release image that is stacked. If not, and if you want to test the latest changes, then use edge or latest. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think we just need to automate how we do all of this, right? We don't want developers to go through this. So I think I'll just have to add to our GitHub Action workflow to accommodate all of those use cases that you just mentioned. For PRs, yes, you do want to, because your PR might actually change the image, right? Let's say. So you do want
reference
that.
by digest instead?
Yes, this is sort of what we're doing now. We're tagging it by digest, and that's basically how we're referring to it.
So,
but this is not great, as they know.
I think Signy, the way this works is when you try to verify a bundle that has CNAB, that has in-toto metadata, Signy is going to need a verification image. And I think by default, our default verification image should be referenced by digest always in Signy, in the actual source code.
Yes. Okay. But that also doesn't have to be a tag. It can just be the @digest reference.
But that doesn't mean users cannot overwrite that image with anything they want. It can be a tag, it can be latest, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to make sure people are aware of is the reason we initially went with running the verification inside a container is because it's not certain that the environment where you want to perform the verification has dependencies required, like the in-toto CLI or in-toto requirements, and any tool that is needed to perform a certain verification, like untar or anything else that bundle authors might require to verify the provenance of a bundle. So as long as everyone is aware that the verification might fail because of a lack of environment, tools, variables, anything like that, this is a possibility that it might happen if you choose not to use a verification image that has everything bundled in. So as long as everyone is aware with that, I'm fine with having the option to verify everything on the operating system. So just wanted to point that out.
Yep, and as Ralph noted, it's the responsibility of the verified to have control over the verification steps.
Yeah, and I think this could also be a certain feature-ish, because people might want to use their own environment to verify things. They might do something with the logging. They might take the logs from the step and push them somewhere else. They might have additional steps that they want to put on top of the verification. So I think having the option for clients to specify how and where the verification steps happen, I think is something that we should keep in mind.
Yep, agree. And that's what we're trying to build in design. Cool. Okay, so I will fix the, I'll try to fix the tagging strategy that we have. Okay, so let's see. The next thing talked about is, yeah, so this is interesting. So Radu and I have been talking for a long time about how to, what's a good software supply chain? Like, if we're adding in-toto, we're basically talking about, I don't want just a machine to sign my bundle JSON. I want to be able to control, I want to be able to track who produced which parts of the bundle as time goes along, right? So we think, after talking to people like Ralph and Jacob, we think we got a good idea about what this minimal example of a software supply chain looks like. Let me share my screen so it makes more sense. Share screen. Where's my terminal? Okay, there we go. Cool. So here's what it looks like. So the PR there gives you a bunch of scripts, and what it does right now is, so you can imagine it will give you a bunch of example layouts out of the box. So layouts are just the software supply chains, right? Like rules. So if you haven't figured it out, it's okay. We'll give you ideas about what we think are common ways that people would configure the pipelines for how they would like to track how their bundles are produced. So this is one example. It's got 2 steps on it. I wish I had a nice picture for this one. Unfortunately, my drawing skills are horrible. But anyway, there's basically 2 steps, and one is the layout key, and I'll explain what it is. Let's just skip through the password generation here. But basically, when you type this, what you get is, this is basically the layout that I've been talking about. This is actually the rules for your software supply chain. It's signed itself, and as long as you have the right public key, which was generated as part of that process just now, you can verify the rules for the pipeline. Okay, so let's take a, in fact, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the code. I think it's going to be much more readable than just looking at the, okay, so the code looks like this. So basically what you're trying to say is that there's a layout. So this is the software supply chain, and what you're saying, what you're signing there, what you saw as part of the JSON is that there are 2 steps in how I produce a bundle. The first is the developer step. So let's take a look at that. What the developer step is basically saying is that, oh, hi, I'm called developer. I got a bunch of public keys, right? So these are the only developers you should trust. And we don't produce any, and basically what we do in this step is we sign something called an attestation or in-toto link. And we're saying, look, we don't take any input or materials, the synonyms. What we do is that we produce everything under the bundle. And the way we say that is we use JSON path to refer to the bundle. And this is the JSON path expression saying developers are allowed to produce any key under bundle.json. right? Does this make sense so far? Feel free to interrupt if something doesn't make sense. Great. So that's the first step, where developers don't take any input, but they are allowed to produce any key they like on the bundle JSON. Fantastic. Now, the second step is what the machine does is we're saying, oh, hi, I'm called a machine, and I've got my own public keys generated as part of the script. These are the only keys you should trust. And as input or materials, what I do is take the products or the output of what developers produce. So it's a way of chaining things together, you see. Machines must take as input exactly what developers produce from the previous step. So this is a way of saying that if there are any attacks in between, you would immediately detect it. Or if the machine was trying to tamper with it and try to say, oh, I don't know what bundle JSON developers produce, I'm just going to make something up. They can't do that, right? So the machine cannot mess with the original bundle that developers produce. However, for the output or products, what machines can do is that they can change, for example, keys under the images key in bundle. So they can fill in hashes and lengths and so on, right? They can modify metadata about images, but they cannot change the names and tags of the images. So there's quite a nice way that we think this is a common use case for how people will produce bundles. That's what we think. We could be wrong. Feel free to correct us, but we think this is a great minimal example. So you've got humans who basically can produce any bundles they like, of course, that's the job of human developers. And then machines are allowed to arbitrarily modify, not arbitrarily, sorry, selectively modify only certain parts of the bundle. Does this make sense so far? Cool. And so those are basically, we're saying that's what the two steps of the each steps are. Those here are all the public keys with developers and machines, and the rules for this pipeline is good for 1 year. We can always change it anytime, but we're saying at most trust this for 1 year right now. And then we sign this and distribute it as part of the tough metadata, notary metadata. This is what it looks like in JSON. It's basically expressing all of the same ideas. Yeah, so we've got this going. I'm very happy to say, so we've generated our first minimal example root layout, right? And the nice thing is, for the first time in total, we're using a new standard in there, a new enhancement to it that lets us, it used to be that in-toto basically did whole file matching. You couldn't talk about parts of files, and now we can. So this is cool. And I'll let our friend Aditya, who is a PhD student at NYU, who's helping us work on this, he's going to show us what the link metadata, which are just signed attestations, that's all they are, what the sign attestations for each step would look like. Aditya, would you like to take it away?
Sure, thanks. So I've been doing this. I've plugged a link to IT4, which is what actually allows us to do cool things like, look at a particular key within a JSON and whatnot. For those who are interested. So I've started working on a little proof of concept implementation of that enhancement to get things going for the CNAB-specific recording of keys and whatnot. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right. So can everyone see my terminal? I think that's a yes. So what I have here is basically, well, I generated my own key pair just for the developer and the machine steps to get it going locally. And apart from that, I have the bundle from the CNAB examples, right? It's the exact same bundle.json. And what I did was, to get this working, I created a version of this where I took out the hashes and whatnot, the actual image name and all of that, so that the machine step can go in and fill it in later. So how this works is we basically just use the in-toto run command to generate the link attestations. So I'm going to use the developer key
So
And
sorry, just I didn't mean to interrupt, but basically what you're showing us is this is what a developer would have to do. And of course, the developer's not expected to type this whole thing, but maybe we can wrap it up in a nice script, but as part of a git commit hook, for example, right?
yeah, pretty much. I don't expect this to happen from the CLI, and for certainly it's not going to happen from the CLI for the machine step. The cool thing is this can be invoked using the by pulling it in as a library anyway, so we can make it part of a hook somewhere. But just here, I'm just going to do it from the CLI. And of course, there are no materials for this step, but I can do something like this. And hang on, I gotta move this little window from Zoom. Okay. And I'm gonna say I don't want to run any commands. So this generates a link attestation for the step where we have now recorded all the hashes for specific keys within that bundle.json. And if we look at content digest, I think that was, yeah. So these fields, we see that all of these have the same hash because currently they're all empty. And then I have a little script for doing the machine stuff, which basically just takes the copy of bundle.json straight from the repository with those fields filled in and replaces that, renames it to bundle.json. So I'm just gonna generate the attestation for that.
So this would be, so for example, after the developer step, presumably the developer then, okay, I'm going to check in the bundle and my signed attestation, the link to GitHub. And now the machine is pulling stuff from the GitHub repo in the pipeline. And now it's signing its own attestation about what's received and outputting, right?
Right, yeah. So here, the machine step accepts the bundle.json as the developer created it as a material, and it's gonna do whatever it does to fill in those fields, for example, and it's gonna generate its own version of bundle.json. So both the material and products, we're just recording the same bundle.json file, and that should generate a link for the machine. Now again, in the materials field, we see this, you know, it's the same hash as before. All of these are empty, but under products, now that it's been filled up, we see new hashes. So we're able to record that the machine went in and changed just those fields, and the other hashes for all the other fields remain the same. So we're able to validate that the machine didn't change anything else that it wasn't supposed to. Everything else is exactly as how the developer wrote it out. We can also see the actual bundle.json itself, because here since I'm just renaming the files, that's the only change that's happened to the bundle. So again, this is possible. This is like the first implementation for Write4 that I'm still playing around with, and I think it's pretty cool.
This is really cool. Thanks a lot for working on this. I only have 2 notes to add. First one is, this is only a template that users can automatically generate using CNAB tooling. They are free to change anything in there, right? They're not required to use any of the rules and verifications that are there by default. They can use anything. They can generate their own in brute layout, right? And then the second one is essentially tough alone allows you to make sure that a file hasn't changed from when it was pushed to a registry until it was pulled by a client, right? This allows you to accurately pinpoint where a file was changed or who changed a particular file, right? So this adds additional value to being able to identify whether something has changed and where in the supply chain it changed. So thanks a lot for working on this.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you. Many thanks to Aditya who really helped us with this. Cool. So that's what we wanted to show, and I don't want to. So that's what we're working on right now. We're not claiming that is the end all be all. I think it's a great start, and we got verification to do after this, right? So we're almost there. We're like 2/3 done, and then the last step is going to be super exciting. Hopefully, we'll get that done the rest of this week, if not next week. So we have 5 minutes left, pretty much. And what I want to talk about, I don't want to miss Ralph's question. Ralph, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I just want to raise some visibility. There's not too much of an action item for this meeting in terms of discussion, but I do want to say that we're getting so close to being able to enable a real workflow that I can start visualizing how this should work on the developer side as opposed to the consumer side. And so I'm starting to think about, so what is the material for a supply chain that we need in a basic sense? And we could even easily use the minimal example in number 74 as the sort of example. And the way I was thinking about this is that you're at very least going to have the developers signing their commits as material for verification at some higher level, say for a release. And then do the in-toto work at the release stage. There's some various things and ways of doing that, but I just want to let people know that so long as I'm understanding sort of a basic scenario for the developer side, I'm going to chat with Microsoft and GitHub organizations about helping people understand and enable signature sign commits as a sort of a easier default. At very least, sort of help the world understand that they can easily enable these, and they should, because in fact, it's not necessarily the default way of doing pushes. So that's one thing I want people to know that I'm going to start doing, and we'll see whether we can elevate the concept a little higher in the general world of development on GitHub, around GitHub, as an example. But the other one was...
Good luck with that, Ralph.
What's that?
Good luck with that.
Well, if you don't try, it doesn't happen. So we'll see where we get. I actually think that in this case, GitHub and Microsoft and others have a vested interest in elevating this at scale in a way that individual ecosystems and cultures may not have been able to keep their focus on it. So hopefully that's the case. Now let's imagine we could generally upskill and make people aware that they could get features down the line by signing their commits. If we could do that, then one of the things we want to do is be able to enable basic in-toto flow for releases, for sign commit repositories in an easy way, and sort of using GitHub as the kind of example, sort of the way we use Notary as the metadata server. The idea of trying to scale this out is not teaching everybody to use Signy properly, but rather having some sort of GitHub action that performs a basic Signy functionality for in-toto endpoints, so that people actually just use the action in order to enable it. At least I'm just sort of generally thinking about that. Radu?
The way I think about it, ideally, developers would only push signed commits, and then there would be some action somewhere which would generate links based on, would check the signature and would generate a link based on that, and add that metadata file to a set of artifacts, which all of which are already possible with actions and CIs in general right now anyway.
Right. So my goal is to sort of flesh this out as we get closer to real working example. And I don't have another action other than that. I'd love to consult anybody's interested in participating in getting that work done. I'm obviously going to tap not just people in the community, but also, people in various organizations, especially at Microsoft and GitHub, to try and see if we can cobble together steps in that direction. So that's basically the thing. I just want everybody to know about it. First of all, to tell me I'm wrong, and second of all, to have a look at it when it starts tumbling along, because I think these are both steps, raising the awareness of the ability for signed commits or kind submits, which really is different, but also the question of getting an action prepared to do exactly that. And that was it. That's the point I want to make.
No, that's great. I think we should think about, especially about how to make signing easier for developers. So I think it's technically possible to go from signed commits to like an intermediate machine signed link, right? About what developers produce that shouldn't be tampered with, right? But I need to think about this. So anyway, unfortunately, it's 12:59, which means we got less than a minute left. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this. Mohammed, I'm sorry we couldn't bring up your question, but perhaps you could post it to the CNAB channel, or we can discuss next week. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate this. Bye now.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.